Hello and welcome back to the channel.
Today, we're talking about my favorite trip to date, and that's Egypt.
Stay tuned for recommendations on how to plan the perfect trip.
We'll share how we visited the pyramids, mummies, the temples along the Nile, and took a breathtaking hot air balloon ride over the Valley of the Kings. Welcome to World Wanderers.
We're Alicia and Will.
Come wander the world with us. Egypt had been at the top of my bucket list since we studied Egyptian history in the second grade, so like 25 years ago for anybody who's trying to do the math.
There is so much history to see in Egypt, and it's been so well preserved.
For a channel named World Wanderers, we definitely have a goal to visit all of the wonders of the world, and the Great Pyramid of Giza might be the most famous.
The Great Pyramid is the largest wonder of the ancient world, and the only ancient wonder that is still mostly intact.
Something I was severely disappointed to find out when I visited Rhodes, Greece in high school and found out that the Colossus of Rhodes was in fact not still there.
The pyramids were only part of this awesome trip though. We saw so much more than we thought we would.
To get to Egypt, you're going to want to fly into Cairo.
This is the capital of Egypt and the country's largest city, home to over 10 million people.
We haven't been to India yet, but this was the most chaotic city we've ever been to.
Yeah, for sure. When driving on the highway, people really don't recognize the lanes at all. It's kind of just every person for themselves, weaving in and out within inches of other cars and the occasional donkey cart.
We tend to be pretty brave when renting cars abroad, but this is a place we would never want to drive.
On the highway, there were cars driving 60 miles an hour next to whole families packed onto a small moped, next to people riding horses.
And in the middle of the highway, there'd be people walking between the lanes, selling souvenirs and drinks. I mean, these people are definitely braver than I am.
So the moral of the story is that we ended up hiring a driver each day to sightsee in Cairo.
There are also cabs, and Uber is another good option if you'd rather do that.
Within the capital area, you can either stay in Cairo, where there are lots of beautiful hotels along the Nile River,
or you can stay in Giza, which is where the pyramids are and where we choose to stay.
They're not very far apart, so we opted to stay in Giza because we wanted the pyramid view. We chose the Hotel Le Méridien Pyramids Hotel and Spa.
It's currently closed for renovations, but we felt that this was the perfect area to stay in and would definitely choose something similar.
We visited in May, and it was already super hot in Egypt. Like 100 degrees Fahrenheit was the average for each day. So we definitely recommend a hotel with a pool, depending on the time of year you're visiting.
Egypt as a whole was so reasonably priced that we felt four-star hotels were a bargain by American standards. And hotels in this zone will all also have excellent concierge services. Our hotel helped us arrange a private driver and a private tour guide when we checked in on the first day, and they helped us basically schedule those people for all the days we spent in Giza and Cairo.
These services were affordable by Western standards and definitely made our trip seamless. On the first day of sightseeing, we headed straight to the pyramids.
The entrance fee is currently 240 Egyptian pounds, or about $5 for tourists to visit the pyramids. The first thing I was struck by was that the pyramids were basically right inside the city. The famous photos make it look like they're in the middle of the desert, but that's not the case.
Yeah, when you look from the opposite direction, you can see like the towering modern buildings in Giza and Cairo, which are quite a bit of a contrast to the ancient structures in the pyramid complex. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the largest Egyptian pyramid. It serves the tomb of Pharaoh Khufu, who ruled during the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom.
It was built in 2600 BC over a period of about 27 years. And sadly, it's illegal to climb the pyramids, but you can walk up a few levels to the interior entrance.
We did choose to go inside the pyramid for a small fee.
I think it's currently around $14.
I will say there's not too much to see inside. There's a very narrow, steep passageway that takes about 20 minutes to climb up, and at the end is the King's Chamber.
The last segment is the narrowest and lowest section of the passage, with a height and width of less than 1.2 meters, so most people will have to duck.
The King's Chamber, located in the center of the pyramid, houses an empty sarcophagus.
You're technically not allowed to take photos inside, but a guard did offer to take a photo for us. If you're claustrophobic or small, non-ventilated spaces bother you, I would probably skip this part.
For the price, we thought it was worth it to see the inside of the pyramid.
And its construction. Next, we headed over to Khafre's pyramid.
This pyramid is in the same complex, and it's the second largest, and in my opinion, the best looking.
It is the only pyramid out of the three main ones in the complex that still has its cladding on the top.
It is a tomb of the 4th dynasty pharaoh Khafre, who ruled from 2558 to 2532 BC.
In front of this pyramid, there are local Egyptians offering camel rides around the complex. We, of course, opted to do this.
It was about $20 for an hour-long tour, where they also stopped to take tons of pictures for us.
And I mean tons. If you're into that kind of thing, which I think they could tell that I was, they were willing to do a whole 15-minute photo shoot.
They had us putting on scarves, standing on the camels. It was crazy and also a little bit scary because the camels are a lot taller than horses.
There are also horse rides available if you'd prefer that, but it was a great way to get an alternative view of the pyramids and get the full Egypt experience.
Afterwards, we stayed in the pyramid complex to go visit the legendary Great Sphinx of Giza.
The limestone statue is a reclining sphinx, a mythical creature with the head of a human and the body of a lion.
The face of the Sphinx is believed to represent the pharaoh Khafre.
Historians believe it was created during his reign in the 2500s BC.
It measures 240 feet long, 66 feet high, and 62 feet wide.
The Sphinx is the oldest known monumental sculpture in Egypt and one of the most recognizable statues in the world.
The circumstances around the Sphinx's nose being broken off are uncertain, but close inspection suggests that a deliberate act was done using a chisel.
This is contrary to the popular myth that it was broken off by cannon fire from Napoleon's troops.
After this, we headed to one of the many famous shops where they sell papyrus.
There are so many beautiful pieces of art to look at or buy, and they also showed us the process of making papyrus.
This is a material similar to thick paper that was used in ancient times as a writing surface. It was made from the pith of the papyrus plant, and it was an interesting process to watch.
Next up, we headed to Saqqara.
This Egyptian village contains ancient burial grounds of Egyptian royalty, serving as the necropolis for the ancient Egyptian capital of Memphis.
Saqqara contains the oldest complete stone building complex known in history, the Pyramid of Djoser.
Sometimes called the step tomb due to its shape, it was built in the 27th century BC.
The next day, we went to the Egyptian Museum. Located in Cairo, the Egyptian Museum houses the largest collection of Egyptian antiquities in the world, with over 120,000 items on display.
This museum is in Tahrir Square and was built in 1901. It is the largest museum in Africa.
Tickets for foreigners cost just 450 Egyptian pounds, which is about $10 US.
It's open daily from 9 to 5 or 9 to 4 during Ramadan.
Among its masterpieces are Pharaoh Tutankhamun's treasure, including the iconic gold burial mask, widely considered one of the best-known works of art in the world and a prominent symbol of ancient Egypt.
There are so many different artifacts to see that you're definitely going to plan to spend at least a few hours here.
When we went to Egypt, the museum also housed 22 mummies. However, in 2021, they were transferred to the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, which is 5 kilometers away. I'm pretty afraid of anything that's like dead body related, but even I could appreciate how cool the mummies were and how well preserved they were.
So definitely make sure to head to the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization to check out the Royal Mummies Gallery while you're in Cairo.
They're also open from 9 to 5 daily, and tickets will cost you 500 Egyptian pounds or $11 US.
After the museum, we headed to the Mosque of Muhammad Ali.
Not the boxer, in case you were also wondering.
The Muhammad Ali Mosque, or Alabaster Mosque, is situated in the citadel of Cairo.
It was commissioned by Muhammad Ali Pasha between 1830 and 1848.
Sitting on the summit of the citadel, this Ottoman mosque is the most visible mosque in Cairo.
It's definitely worth going inside to see the beautiful interior, and they provide free robes for women to wear to respect their tradition of covering your head.
Also want to mention the food we had in Egypt was fantastic.
Yeah, I was surprised by how much we loved the food. The falafel here was better than anywhere else I've ever tasted it.
And the steaks and Western food were very affordable, so we ate pretty well on every meal.
And as a country with a large Muslim population, I really appreciated their selection of mocktails. As somebody who doesn't drink, I always appreciate when a country has a non-alcoholic menu that's just as large as the regular cocktail menu.
Before leaving Cairo, we went on one last camel ride.
We loved the first one so much that we decided to take another one at sunset.
The atmosphere at sunset was perfect. We had a lovely picnic with tea and snacks to sit and enjoy the view.
For the next segment of our trip, we took a short 1 hour flight from Cairo to Aswan.
Here we decided to take a 4-day cruise down the Nile River.
Now, these aren't super luxurious Viking river cruises that are famous in Europe, but they're a similar sized boat.
There are tons of different independent tour operators doing these cruises, and you can find a bunch of them with more or less identical itineraries.
We booked through the website Viator, and you can either start in Luxor or start in Aswan like we did. It's the same experience, but the stops would be reversed.
Prices are currently around $350 per adult, and this includes your lodging, food, tour guide, transfers from the airport, and activities.
We thought it was a pretty good all-inclusive deal for the amount of stuff they took us to see. We'll leave a link in the description if you want to check out the available options.
The cabins were a little older and dated in the boat we were on, but very spacious as far as like ship cabins go. And most of the boats had a small pull up in the top deck.
Once we got there, a guide from the cruise ship picked us up at the airport and we were brought to the boat. We checked in, left our luggage in our room, had some lunch, and then immediately went off to start exploring.
Our first stop was the Aswan High Dam. It was built in 1960 to protect Egypt from the floods and generate electricity.
After this, we headed to the Temple of Philae. We got there by taking a small motorboat because the complex is located on an island.
This Greco-Roman temple was dedicated to the goddess Isis.
The temple complex was originally located on Philae Island in Upper Egypt. That area had been flooded since the initial construction of the Aswan Low Dam in 1902. So the temple complex was dismantled and moved to the nearby island as part of a UNESCO Nubia campaign project, protecting this and other complexes before the 1970 completion of the Aswan High Dam.
The hieroglyphic reliefs in the temple complex are still being studied.
The next day, we woke up super early and drove about 190 miles to the famous Abu Simbel temple complex.
Abu Simbel is a historic center comprising two massive rock-cut temples in Upper Egypt, near the border with Sudan.
The twin temples were originally carved out of the mountainside in the 13th century BC, before the 19th dynasty reign of the pharaoh Ramses II.
Their huge external rock relief figures of Ramses II have become iconic.
His wife, Nefertari, and children can be seen in smaller figures by his feet.
Sculptures inside the Great Temple commemorate Ramses II's heroic leadership at the Battle of Kadesh.
After a long drive back, we headed to the Temple of Kom Ombo.
This is an unusual double temple in Upper Egypt. It was constructed during the Ptolemaic dynasty between 180 and 47 BC, and some additions to it were later made during the Roman period.
The building is unique because its double design meant that there were courts, halls, sanctuaries, and rooms duplicated for two sets of gods.
The southern half of the temple was dedicated to the crocodile god Sobek, god of fertility and one of the creators of the world.
Meanwhile, the northern part of the temple was dedicated to the falcon god Horus.
The temple was atypical because everything is perfectly symmetrical along the main axis.
The next day, we saw the Temple of Horus at Edfu.
This is considered to be the most complete and best preserved of all the Egyptian temples.
The temple was built in the Ptolemaic kingdom between 237 and 57 BC.
The inscriptions on its walls provide important information on language, myth, and religion during the Hellenistic period in Egypt.
We got back to the boat and continued to sail towards Luxor.
Later that afternoon, we explored Luxor Temple.
The Luxor Temple is a large ancient Egyptian temple complex located on the east bank of the Nile River in a city today known as Luxor.
It was constructed in approximately 1400 BC when Luxor was known as Thebes.
Unlike the other temples in Thebes, Luxor Temple is not dedicated to a god or a pharaoh.
Instead, Luxor Temple was dedicated to the rejuvenation of kingship.
It may have been where the pharaohs of Egypt were crowned in reality or conceptually.
We then went to the Temple of Karnak to see the largest temple ever built. It was built over the course of 2,000 years and covers an area of about 63 acres.
Approximately 30 pharaohs contributed to the buildings, enabling it to reach a size and complexity and diversity not seen elsewhere.
Few of the individual features of Karnak are unique, but the size and number of features are vast.
The area around Karnak was the ancient Egyptian main place of worship. The original name of the temple was Itinerary, meaning the most select of places.
The complex's modern name, Karnak, comes from the nearby village of El Karnak, which means fortified village.
After this, we headed back to the ship for our final night on the cruise after an exhausting day of sightseeing.
On the final morning of the cruise, we got picked up at 5 a.m. for a hot air balloon ride.
When we got there, it was looking like it would be too windy for the balloons to go up, and there were about to be real tears from me. But in the end, they got them to inflate and we took off. It was the experience of a lifetime ballooning over the Valley of the Kings and watching the sunrise.
The views were spectacular, and we had even more excitement when the balloon behind us hit a tree on landing and its basket almost tipped over.
But in reality, it was definitely one of the highlights of the whole trip, if not one of my highlights of all travel experiences ever.
Yeah, it was great. After the balloon ride, we went to see the Colossi of Memnon. These are two massive stone statues of the pharaoh Amenhotep III that stand in front of the ruined Mortuary temple of Amenhotep III, the largest temple in the Theban necropolis.
They have stood since 1350 BC and were well known to ancient Greeks and Romans, as well as early modern travelers and Egyptologists.
The statues contain 107 Roman-era inscriptions in Greek and Latin, dated to between 20 and 25 AD.
Next, we headed to the Valley of the Kings. Here, the pharaohs from the New Kingdom carved their tombs in the mountains, aiming to hide their treasure and protect their mummies.
The Valley of the Kings garnered significant attention following the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamen in 1922.
You're able to go inside King Tut's tomb, and the colors and hieroglyphics are amazing.
Most of the tomb's goods were sent to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo and are now in the Grand Egyptian Museum in Giza.
Although Tutankhamun's mummy and sarcophagus are still on display in the tomb.
Tutankhamen tomb was discovered in 1922 by excavators led by Howard Carter.
As a result of the quantity and spectacular appearance of the burial goods, the tomb attracted a media frenzy and became the most famous find in the history of Egyptology.
The death of Carter's patron, the Earl of Carnarvon, in the midst of the excavations, inspired speculation that the tomb was cursed.
Next, we headed to the Mortuary Temple of Hatshepsut. This beautiful temple of the famous queen is considered to be a masterpiece of ancient architecture.
Its three massive terraces rise above the desert floor and into the cliffs of Deir el-Bahari, where her tomb lies, and was really cool to explore.
This marked the end of our trip, and then we flew back to Cairo to make our connecting flight back home to the United States.
The thing about a trip to Egypt is there's so much history, so many sights to see, and each thing is more unbelievable than the last.
It's been my favorite trip, and because we packed all of those sites into just 8 days in Egypt.
We could have done it at a slower pace and added in Alexandria or the resorts over on the Red Sea if we had more time. But I think that the value you get in a trip to Egypt is unmatched.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like to help us out, and make sure to subscribe to be notified of future videos like these.
And if you have any Egypt recommendations or questions, please leave a comment below so we can check them out.
Safe travels!